why use just half your brain? And that, when some of the top readers are tested, brain hemispheric dominance test, a lot of them tend to be more right-brained because it's not just a left brain process where they're saying the words themselves, they're experiencing the words. They're imagining the words, they're creating the words, they're feeling the words, they're visualizing the words. So it tends to be a more right brain or a more whole brain process. And what we're going to be doing in the next session, upcoming sessions for the quick reading program, is showing you how to get more of your right brain connected to it. All right, more activated. So you're using more than a small percentage of your brain. You're using more of a whole brain, and and that's what you want to be able to do. I remember when I first learned these skills. There was a movie out. There was a book out by John Grisham. That's with it had a movie out was with Tom Cruise. He played a lawyer for the attorney for the mob, and it was called The Firm, right? And at the same time, the book was out. The movie came out, and a bunch of friends wanted to say, "Hey, let's go see the movie." And I said to him, "Well, I didn't see the, I didn't finish, I didn't start the book yet. You ever been in that situation? It's like you want to read this book, you never get around to it, and then the movie comes out, and you really want to see the movie, but you don't want to, watch it till get to read the book, and you never get to read the books, you never get to see the movie." And basically, what happened was they're like, "Well, let's go to the theater and just grab your book." And I end up going to the theater. I take my book off the shelf, and we get to the theater and the movie theater, and they say, "Should we buy you a ticket for the movie?" And I was like, "You know what? I'm gonna stay here in the lobby. I'm just gonna start my book." And I do, and I finish the book. And later on, they walk out of the movie theater, and I was like, "Well, how's the movie?" And they're like, "Eh, it was okay." And they're like, how's the book?" And I was like, "Wow, the book was really good. I really liked it." And even if you watch like some of the interviews that Grisham did, he was like, "What did they do to my movie?" Because isn't the book always better than the movie? I mean, absent some of the stuff that James Cameron could do, and Steven Spielberg and George Lucas could do nowadays, on film. I find that reading a book, when you're reading it right, it's so much better than what a lot of movie producers and directors could do, because nobody could do what you could do with your own imagination. Because literally, have you ever been in that state where you're really using a lot of your right brain? You're picking up the book and you just feel like you're in the book. You could smell the smells, you could feel the feelings of walking on the sand and hearing what you would hear, and you're just totally associated, if you will, as if you're in the book. And that's a lot of that's happening in your right brain. So that being said, we're going to teach you number strategies to make this reading, because quick reading is definitely a whole brain process, and that's what quick thinking and quick memory is all about, a whole brain system. And why limit yourself to one side? And so we're going to teach you to be a little bit more versatile, if you will. Now that being said, I'm going to ask you, while you're practicing, which is the fifth P, to use one specific hand while you're reading. A specific hand while you're reading. And the hand I'm going to ask you to, now guess which hand that would be. Some people say left, some people say right. There's only so many possibilities, obviously, unless you're holding out on me. I ask people to use their left brain, and excuse me, their left hand, if they will. And one of the reasons why is that there's research coming out, and I've been teaching this way for a very long time. But I ask people to use their left hand while they read, because as you know, there's a brain-body connection. There's a mind-body connection that certainly and they know this through science, that God forbid somebody who's had any kind of damage on their left brain, if they're paralyzed, they'd be paralyzed on what side of their body? On the right side, right? If they have a stroke on one side, it tends to be, they would have paralysis or some kind of challenge on their left side, or vice versa, because it would be cross laterals. It's like whatever's below the neck, it's opposite. So one left side of your brain controls the right side of your body, the right side of your brain controls your left side of the body. Well, what science is coming out with, and we've been doing this for years and years and years now, is that by using parts of your body, it actually helps to, there's also as there is a brain-body connection, there's also a body-brain connection, that by using parts of your body can actually help stimulate, that part of the brain. So what I want you to practice with is using your left hand while you read, and you're underlining the words, and I'll show you how specifically in a moment. But using your left hand, so it helps to maybe stimulate different parts of your right side of your brain, which maybe could help to activate more of those areas: imagination, creativity, visualization, and such. I mean, there was a book that came out a few years ago called Keep Your Brain Alive. Keep Your Brain Alive by Dr. Lawrence Katz. And it's a very small book, and I would recommend you pick it up. It's less than $10. And this scientist basically was spending time with seniors, wanting to find out how they could keep their mental agility and their memory and their mental powers and strength at later years. And they created a protocol, of 80 or so different techniques and tips and exercises that they could do, calling them neurobics, to keep their brain active. And a lot of those exercises had to do with just using the opposite hand while you brush your teeth or while you eat a meal. And a lot of exercises like juggling to be able to stimulate your brain. And they found out that it was so useful for seniors, and they were like, well, why can't everyone be doing this? And they created a book called Keep Your Brain Alive, Dr. Lawrence Katz, and you can certainly pick that up to find out some of those things that you could be doing. And so now, if you're using your left finger, how specifically should you be using it? And I want to show you how to do it here. And there's different ways, and different speed reading methodologies teach you different ways and techniques. And I'll go through a couple of them. Some of the famous ones are things like the S method, if you will. You're using your finger, and you can see on the screen, kind of looks like an S. The challenge, though, as you might be thinking, as you're using your fingers to kind of make this S page, this S forms down the page, is that you miss big gaps of information. But you get the gist of something, right? And it's hard, because when I'm teaching, a lot of our clients at Kwik Learning, they're financial advisors, they're lawyers, they're doctors, and I don't think you want your financial advisor, your attorney, or your doctor just to get the gist of what they read. But here you're going through, and this is like a scanning method. It's kind of a skimming way, and I do like it for skimming. I don't like it so much for reading, because you would notice that you're missing big parts of the information. But that's the S method. Another method that's very popular in traditional speed reading is the center method, where you're taking your finger and going right down the page. And a lot of programs will teach this. And I think, again, it's very useful in the context of scanning or skipping words, or getting the gist of something and skimming something, because maybe that's all you need to do. And that could be especially useful maybe if the margins were a little bit closer. Right? And so if the width wasn't so wide, maybe if it was more like a newspaper, that would be useful. But the center method, but then you miss everything on the left side and everything on the right side, because your eyes can't fixate and be able to take in more than maybe 2 or 3 words at a time. So the center method. I'm not saying any of that. What I'm saying is that if you just take your finger and just single line method, go from your left to your right, all the way to the end, circle back, and then read the next line. Circle back and read the next line. Circle back, and you're underlining the words. You're not skipping any words, so you're not scanning or skimming or skipping words, so your comprehension is strong, yet you still have the focus of using your finger. Because notice, as you're using your finger, you no longer are spending time regressing. Right? One of the obstacles to effective reading, going back and rereading words. You're probably not going to reread words if you're consciously pulling yourself through the page. You're also probably not going to spend as much time distracting yourself, because your focus will be greater, because you're looking at your finger and you're underlining the words and you're looking directly above your finger. All right? And I would also suggest that at first you could certainly drag your finger on the page, touch the page, but what will happen naturally is you'll probably start lifting your finger right above the page. Because as you go faster and faster, you have this thing called friction, and you don't want to catch the book on fire. Now, there's a lot of books that way, right? So you want to just underline the words, maybe a little bit above the page, and get used to it. Now, when you first start to do this, it may feel a little uncomfortable. And I would like to say a new belief, new attitude, and new psychology, going back to the mindset stuff that we talked about earlier, is you want to think about maybe some confusion and some uncomfort is good. It's kind of like learning how to type. It was a little bit awkward, wasn't it? It was a little awkward to use all 10 fingers and have your home keys and get the feel of it. And just like shifting a car, if you will, where people have manuals, you're shifting the car, it feels a little bit awkward, but after a while of practice, it becomes more comfortable. All right, so what I'm going to ask you right now to do is to practice. I want you to take your book, and I want you to pick up where you left off and just read. And I want you to hold the book again. It's in your peak state right now. Sit up in your peak state. You're sitting up. Take a deep breath. Exhale. Breathe. If you have some water next to you, like I do, and breathe, sip some water. Perfect. And now have your book, open it up, tilt it a little bit so it's comfortable. Maybe hold it up on top so you're holding the page, holding the book open, or holding it on the bottom so you're holding the page open. And I want you to pick up where you left off and just begin using your left finger. All right? And you should not do this perfectly, okay? Do not do this perfectly if you're a perfectionist, because you won't. And if you are, don't do it perfectly, all right? Because it wasn't perfect the first time I did it. So underline the words, go margin to margin, and just get the rhythm and the flow and the tempo. Don't focus so much on what you're reading, or you can if you want. And the subvocalization, do it. Say the words to yourself. Do not try to not do it, because the more you try not to do it, the more you're going to do it. All right? It's like thinking of a big pink elephant. Don't think of a big pink elephant. Don't, for $1,000,000, do not think of a big pink elephant. The more you tell yourself not to do something, the more you're going to do it, just like your kids. So you're underlining the words, and you're going margin to margin, and you're developing the rhythm and the tempo of a good reader. All right, and you're going back and forth, and you're just underlining the words. Get used to it. And if you want to read it, read it. If you don't want to read it, if you just want to get the gist of it, that's fine. But what I want you to more do is get the physical mechanics of it. Right? And I don't want you to try to read as you're trying to learn how to do it, because you're going to say to yourself, am I really doing it right? Am I doing it right? And by the way, the very nature of you talking to yourself is going to distract you from reading. All right, I want to say that again. If you're reading, if you're using your finger trying to read, and you're saying to yourself, well, I'm not getting it, am I really doing it right? First of all, besides this negative programming, besides that, you're subvocalizing different words, and that alone is going to make it hard to concentrate. So if you're having a conversation inside your head with yourself, and you're trying, quote unquote, to read, it's not going to work. Because you can't have a conversation inside your head or outside and still read at the same time. Or maybe you can, and you should be teaching this course. So you're underlining the words, and as you're reading, you're underlining the words. Just get the feel for that. And I want you to just read for a couple of minutes, feel what that feels like, and you're not going to get it right. It's going to feel different. And even if you're left-handed, use your left hand and read for 2 minutes. I'm just going to play some music softly in the background so you can hear it. Okay, so that was a minute. Now stop. And I want you to, how did that feel to you? Now, if you're like most people, it probably felt awkward and uncomfortable even. You're like, how do I hold a book? It's kind of awkward using my fingers because I've never done it before. And again, your success, and whether it's this or it's the memory program or think or it's anything, whether it's golf, a little bit has to do, or maybe a lot has to do with your ability to go into uncertainty. That if you know something already, if it feels completely comfortable for you, you're probably not learning something new. Let me say that again. If you're learning something for the first time and it's not a little bit confusing for your mind or your body, a little awkward, then you probably are not learning something new, because you're probably reinforcing what you already know. All right, so if it feels a little bit different, then that's okay. All right, because you're going to practice it, just like tying your shoe, and to the point where you get it and it becomes unconscious. Okay, so pick up where you left off again and continue to read using your left finger and underlining the words. Okay, and stop. Now, how did that feel the second time? Now, you only done this for a total of 2 minutes. Now, I would hazard a guess the second time was a little bit easier. All right, a little bit easier. And this is what you really want to get used to. And you're thinking, do I need to use my finger for the rest of my life? The answer is you will never read as fast if you don't use your finger. But certainly after this program, you'll be reading quicker without using your finger. But I like to train under optimal conditions. You're going through and you're using your finger. And what I would also say is that you don't want to just move your finger back and forth, back and forth. You want to move kind of like your arm. Move your arm across the page because your finger is kind of like a small muscle, but your arm is very big. And you could do this a lot longer with your arm than you can just moving your finger back and forth. All right. So this is your reading exercise. So what I want you to do now is let's time it. All right, now let's time it. Actually pick up where you left off and let's actually read. Now, keep in mind, you've only done this for 2 minutes, but I want to show you the kind of progress that you can make. So pick up where you left off, put a little mark in the margin, and what I'd like you to do, and you could even pick up where you left off from the previous one, either way, is I'd like you to read now for a full 2 minutes like you did the first time. But this time I want you to use your left finger for those 2 minutes and underline the words and read just like how you're practicing for the previous couple of minutes. And I'm going to have you read for 2 minutes exactly. And then we're going to time it and I'm going to ask you to count the number of lines that you just read. Okay? So get ready. Pick up where you left off. See the mark in the margin where you're starting. That's very important. Put a little mark in the margin where you're starting. And begin reading using your left finger now. And breathe while you're doing this. Don't hold your breath. Sitting in the right posture. And time. Perfect. So that was 2 minutes. Now what I'd like you to do is put a little mark in the margin with your pen or pencil and begin to count the number of lines you just read in those 2 minutes. And when you're done, do the same thing you did at the beginning of this session and count the number of lines, divide it by 2, and then add a 0 or multiply by 8, however you did it in the first one. Notice as you're counting how you're pointing. Okay, once you have that number, divide by 2, add a 0 or multiply by 8. Adding a 0 is like multiplying by 10, right? Or multiply by 8 or whatever the average line, words per line is for your book, and you have a number. Now what I'm going to ask you as you stop to do this exercise, is what is that number? What is that number? And write it down. And what I hallucinate is happening, even with just a very, very little practice, because you only practiced it for 2 minutes before this, is that your rate has increased a little bit. Now, for some people, it increases a lot. Now, can you imagine what will happen after more diligent practice, where it becomes more second nature? And that's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you to practice between this session and the next session for this next week, just using your finger while you read. And I'm going to ask you, when we're talking about the fifth P, which is practice, and this is really when, I'm going to ask you to practice 20 minutes a day. 20 minutes a day of practice. Because this is really about creating a habit. And what you're doing with the practice is you're just underlining the words using your left hand. Okay, you're going to take, and I would read your fiction reading book. Practice reading it. Definitely understand what you're reading, but that's secondary to getting the actual technique. Practice sitting the way you're sitting. Create your optimal learning environment as best your ability. Practice there as much as you can. Put yourself into a peak state. Have plenty of oxygen, plenty of water. Sit up straight. Take your book, tilt it, and then just read using your finger, underlining margin to margin, reading 20 minutes a day. Okay? And what I'm going to ask you to do is to do this also. You want to practice, and we're going to practice, this for another week. And ultimately, what you practice in private, you're rewarded for in public, right? Because practice makes permanent. And I'm going to ask you to do it for a solid 21 days. Because going back to psychology, remember taking your psychology classes, that they have something called the law of 21. It takes about 21 or 30 days to break a habit or create a new habit. So that way, if you think about riding a bike or learning how to type or learning how to shift your car, it takes about 21 days of practice each day to be able to ingrain it to the point where you're doing it unconsciously. Remember, if you took the reading class or the quick thinking program, that you have 5 levels of learning. First, it's unconscious incompetence. That means you don't know how to do something. That's like for speed reading. You don't know how to do it because you don't even know it exists at some point in your life. You didn't even know it existed. Then, when you first learned about speed reading and quick reading, in this example, you become consciously incompetent. Conscious incompetence means you know you can't do something because you're aware, which is conscious. You're incompetent, that you don't know how to do something. Then you get to the level of conscious competence. And that's where we're going to get you here over the next week. Conscious competence. That means we could read faster, but it takes your conscious attention, right? You're competent at doing it, but it takes your focus and your conscious awareness. And then the fourth level of learning is where you go unconsciously competent. That means you practice for another 21, 30 days, and you start to speed read, you start to quick read unconsciously. Because you've done it for 21, 30 days, 20 minutes a day, practicing it, and becomes permanent. And then you have the skill for yourself. And you could always go back to typing like 2 fingers, but you could always go back to typing with all 10 fingers, right? And so that's what we're looking for. And the fifth level is level of mastery. Psychologists say that, and scientists say it takes about 10,000 hours of doing something consistently to become a master at it. And that's something, if you want to be able to practice, obviously it's great thing about it is you can practice every single day. That's what's great about these quick thinking and these quick recall techniques. It's no extra time. It's like you're going to be doing it anyway, so why not be practicing and training while you're doing it? It's like everything is kung fu. Everything is you're incorporating this psychology of constant improvement, ongoing, in everything that you're doing. So you want to practice. And I would also suggest, besides practicing every single day for 20 minutes, is that you practice during peak times. Peak times, and what I'm calling peak time is really when your quick learning abilities are coming out the most. Some people feel like they're morning people, some people they feel like they're night people, but if you reverse it and practice when you're not at your peak, certainly your results are going to vary and change dramatically. So when you're at your best. If you're a morning person or a night person, some people, if they practice at night, they're going to be too tired, after a full day of work or with the family or what have you. And nighttime's not the good. A lot of people like practicing, honestly, this right in the beginning because it wakes up their brain. So if you're in doubt, I would practice first thing in the morning. But here's the thing, you got to schedule it. You got to schedule it because what you talk about become, you know this, talk is cheap. What you talk about, it's just kind of like a dream. But when you put something on a schedule, like you do your clients, or you do your, for your meetings, or you do like you would schedule time with your boss, that's how I'd treat this. Because there's no more important person than you. Because how can you give to somebody you don't have for yourself? And it's hard to be good for everybody if you're not good for yourself. But if you're one of those people who's kind of a martyr, I would say schedule it. Put it on your calendar and make it time with a very important person, a VIP, and that VIP is you. Schedule yourself out 20 minutes a day to practice, because this is one of those skills, one of a handful of skills that you could improve on that will help with almost every area. It'll allow give you knowledge and be able to tap into knowledge base and wisdom unheard. Because, like, think about it, when you go into a library, you go into a bookstore, there's a book out there for practically everything to solve a problem in practically every area of life or business. It's just having the time to be able to do this. But this is also something that you're going to be doing every single day for the rest of your life, is reading. All right, and this is something that if you learn it now, better to sharpen the saw now than 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 20 years from now. Because it's like, most people are not sharpening their saw, and they're going out there trying to cut down trees with a very dull blade. So when is it better for that person, that lumberjack who's cutting down the trees with the dull blade? Is it better for him or her to sharpen it when he's done, or she's done, or do it in the beginning? Certainly in the beginning. That's why I appreciate you so much for taking the time. You've gone through this entire program. Maybe you've graduated some of our past programs, but this reading program was an intense program, and yet you've listened to it all the way to the end because you're a completionist. You're somebody who doesn't dabble in things. You're here because you want to get a result, and you're committed to it, and that's why I'm committed to you. So I would say make that commitment to yourself and schedule the time that you have to be able to do this, because when you schedule and you do it for 21, 30 days, it becomes you. Right? Because first your habit, you create your habits, and then your habits create you. And here's a quote from Aristotle, one of the great philosophers, Greek philosophers. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. And so that's really what we're developing here. That reading maybe is not a matter of intelligence. Maybe good readers just have good reading habits because they learn properly. And that's what you're doing here. Now in the next session, what we're going to do, and just want to repeat here, the assignment for this week then is just practice reading with your left finger for 20 minutes a day. Set up your learning environment. Monitor your posture, have plenty of water while you read, do some deep breathing, get yourself into peak state, create your optimal learning environment, and practice reading with your left finger for 20 minutes a day. And when we return next week, what we're going to do is, in the next session, I'm going to focus a little bit more on reading speed and give you some more reading drills, but I want you to just get this finger motion down, and I'm going to really focus more on reading comprehension, reading focus, and reading retention. So you did fabulous today. Give yourself a pat on the back, and I look forward to serving you in the next session, and have an unforgettable day.